Strength from failure, inspired by Stoic wisdom. In life, no one escapes failure. Some people stumble once and decide they are not meant to try again. Others see failure as the end of their story, a final proof of inadequacy. But in the philosophy of Stoicism, practiced by thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, failure is never the enemy. It is an essential part of growth, a teacher in disguise, a moment that tests discipline and resilience. The Stoics remind us of one simple truth. We cannot always control outcomes, but we can always control our response. A failure does not mean weakness. It is an invitation to return to ourselves, to rise again with calmness, clarity, and determination. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his Meditations, "When you are jarred unavoidably, return at once to yourself and do not lose the rhythm more than you can help. You will have a better grasp of harmony if you return to it again and again." At first glance, these words look simple, but hidden within them is an entire way of life. Failure is only a moment of being out of rhythm, a temporary dissonance in the music of existence. What matters is not the stumble itself, but how quickly we return to the melody. If we spend our lives only trying to avoid failure, we also avoid the very opportunities that shape who we are meant to become. Marcus Aurelius knew this not from theory, but from experience. As Emperor of Rome, he faced wars, plagues, and political unrest. He suffered losses on the battlefield, made decisions that drew criticism, and carried the heavy burden of responsibility. Yet he did not treat these setbacks as curses. He treated them as exercises, opportunities to practice patience, courage, and wisdom. He understood that the value of failure lies not in what it takes away, but in what it can build within us. This perspective lives on today in every field where discipline matters. Michael Jordan, widely considered the greatest basketball player in history, once said, "I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." He was cut from his high school team. He missed thousands of shots. He lost games that mattered. But each failure became fuel, sharpening his discipline until success was inevitable. The Stoics would have called this the bridge between failure and victory. Discipline. Without it, failure defeats us. With it, failure becomes the foundation of greatness. I once had a small business project that collapsed within months. I poured in time, money, and trust, only to watch it unravel. At first, I blamed circumstances, the market, even other people. But eventually I realized the lesson was mine to accept. That failure taught me discipline in managing finances, discipline in assessing risk, and discipline in controlling my emotions. Without that experience, I would have continued to live under the illusion that I was already good enough. Failure humbled me, and that humility became strength. The world of entrepreneurship is filled with such stories. Steve Jobs, after co-founding Apple, was famously fired from his own company. Many would have treated that as a humiliating end. Instead, Jobs created Next, purchased Pixar, and transformed it into an animation empire. Years later, Apple asked him to return, and under his leadership, the company reached heights no one had imagined. Jobs himself said that being fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to him. Failure cleared the path for a new beginning. Elon Musk faced collapse after 3 failed rocket launches at SpaceX, while Tesla drowned in debt. He was on the edge of bankruptcy. But failure did not end his story. It refined his vision. Each unsuccessful launch brought new data, new lessons, and eventually a breakthrough that changed the aerospace industry. Musk's story is a living reminder that failure is not final. It is a test of how committed we are to keep moving forward. Athletes also embody this principle every day. Serena Williams battled injuries and even postpartum depression, but she returned to the court with determination, proving again that greatness is not the absence of setbacks, but the courage to continue despite them. Cristiano Ronaldo, as a boy, cried every time his team lost. Over time, he transformed those tears into fuel. Through relentless training and uncompromising discipline, he turned himself into one of the greatest footballers in history. Their lives echo Stoic wisdom. Focus only on what you can control, your effort, your discipline, your response, and let the rest unfold as it must. So how do we transform failure into strength in our own lives? The path is simple but demanding. First, we must acknowledge failure instead of denying it. To pretend it did not happen only prolongs pain. Second, we must analyze and learn. Every failure carries a lesson about strategy, discipline, or self-awareness. And finally, we must stand up and continue. As Marcus Aurelius said, when the rhythm is broken, we must return to ourselves and resume the music. Failure is not a full stop. It is a comma, a pause to breathe, to realign, to prepare for the next sentence in our story. Like silence in a symphony, failure creates contrast, making the return of the melody even more powerful. Without the stumble, the rise would have no meaning. The Stoics teach us that the true power of life does not lie in avoiding hardship, but in facing it with strength and calmness. Success that has never been tested by failure is fragile. Success that has been forged in failure, however, is unbreakable. So when you stumble, do not despair. When you fall, do not believe the story is over. Remember the emperor who led through war and plague. Remember the athlete who turned defeat into discipline. Remember the entrepreneur who turned rejection into rebirth. And above all, remember that failure is not the opposite of success. It is the soil in which success grows. When you are out of rhythm, return to yourself and continue. That is the essence of Stoic resilience. That is the strength born from failure. And that is the story worth living.